Hello everyone, have a good and blessed day, especially to our instructor, Ma Meljo and Bidizon. So for next video, I'm going to answer in Botany Lesson 6. So these are the 4 questions to be answered. So now if you want to learn, let's get started. First questions, based on the discussion, what is the difference between light-dependent and light-independent reactions? So, in light-dependent reactions, energy from the sunlight absorbed by chlorophyll and that energy is converted into stored chemical energy. In the light-independent reactions, the chemical energy harvested during the light-dependent reactions drives the assembly of sugar molecules from the carbon dioxide. And also light-dependent reactions, which takes place in the thylakoid membrane, use light energy to make ATP and NADPH. So while the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma, uses energy derived from these compounds to make Ge3P from CO2. Light reaction is the process of photosynthesis that converts energy from the sun into the chemical energy in the form of NDP and ATP. So, when we see light reactions, the light reaction is known as the photolysis reaction that takes place in the presence of light. It usually takes place in the grana or chloroplast. So, the photosystems have pigment molecules. In the plants, chlorophyll is one of the primary pigments which actively takes part in the process of light reaction like photosynthesis. So the accessory pigments include the energy from the sun absorbed by the chlorophyll in the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. The energy is then transferred to ATP and NADPH. That is generated by 2 electrons transport chains. Water is used and oxygen is released during the process. In light-independent reactions, after the energy from the sun is converted into chemical energy and temporarily stored in ATP and NDPH. So, in the second questions, how are protons absorbed and utilized in the first stage of photosynthesis? So, the light-induced electron transfer in the photosynthesis drives the protons into the thylakoid lumen. The excess protons flow out of the lumen through ATP synthesis to generate ATP in the stroma. So photosynthesis occurs into 2 stages. During the first stage, the energy from sunlight is absorbed by the chloroplast. Water is used and oxygen is produced during the part of the process. This is where a carbon dioxide is used to produce glucose in the second part of the photosynthesis. First stage, if chlorophyll absorbs a proton of particular energy, one of the electrons jumps to an excited state. So these chlorophyll molecules salt inside of photosystems, with many other chlorophylls in its ground state. These chlorophyll molecules sit inside of photosystems, with many other chlorophylls in its ground state, are represented by blue circles, and these excitation states represented by yellow-green circle after absorbing a photon represented by yellow circle. Conjugate pass around from the molecule to molecule with the electrons relaxing back to the ground state, emitting to another proton that will excite an electron in another molecules, and so forth, like a pinball machine. So, after the photon strikes in the reaction center complex, the high energy exciting electrons, rather than relaxing back down to the ground state, will instead be transferred to another molecules called the primary electrons acceptor above the reaction center complex. So the questions number 3. Summarize the process of light reactions and Calvin cycle. So, light-dependent reactions, which takes place in the thylakoid membrane, use the light energy to make ATP and NADPH. The Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma, uses energy derived from these compounds to make Ga3P from CO2. And also, the light reactions process is the first stage of photosynthesis process in which solar energy converted into chemical energy. In the form of ATP and NADPH, the protein complexes and the pigments of molecules help in the productions of NADPH and ATP. So the process of light reactions is the light reactions energy from the sunlight is absorbed by the pigment chlorophyll and is converted into chemical energy in the form of electron charge carrier molecules such as NADPH and ATP. So light energy is utilized both the photosystems 1 and 2, present inside the thylakoid membranes of the chloroplast. So the cytochrome uses the electrons energy from a photosystems 8 to pump the ions of the hydrogen form of lumen to stroma. Later, this energy allows the ATP synthesis. Cytochrome uses the electrons energy from the photosystems 2 to pump the ions of the hydrogen form the lumen to stroma. Later, this energy allows the ATP synthesis to bind to the third phosphate group of the ADP molecule, which then forms the ATP. So in the process of acylophotophosphorylation, the cytochrome B6F uses electrons energy from both the photosystems 1 and 2 to create a number of ATP and stops the productions of NADPH, thus maintaining the right quantities of ATP and NADPH. So, thus the light reactions harnessed the light energy to drive the transport of electrons and the pumping of the proton to convert the energy from the light into the biological useful form ATP and produces a usable source of producing the power of NADPH. So the carbohydrates molecules are obtained from the carbon dioxide from the use of chemical energy gathered during the reactions. So the light energy drains the plate into water and later extracts the electrons from the photosystem to that. Then the electrons move from the PS2 to BF shape of cytochrome or cytochrome to the photosystems. So photosystem 1 or PS1 and reduced in the form of energy. So the electrons are energized in the photosystem 1 and the electrons of high energy reduced an NADP plus into the NADPH. So now let's proceed to the questions number 4 number. So, what are all the byproducts of light-dependent and light-independent reactions? So the products of light-independent reactions, ATP and NADPH, have lifespans in the range of a millionth of a second areas. Whereas the product of the light-independent reactions or carbohydrates and other forms of reduced carbons can survive hundreds of millions of years. So that's all. Thank you for watching and God bless. Keep safe always and bye-bye.